At this point, we'll transition to our featured speaker and program. And to give you a first look at an opportunity you've got by the end of the meeting, our speaker has authored a book on the topic. So if I was sitting in the seats at the table with you, I would be thinking about, is this a topic I want to know more about? And I do, so I bought mine. At this point, we're going to ask John Bridge to the podium in just a moment. John's classification is fashion and design, but I want to give you a couple of fun facts about John before he shines the spotlight on our speaker. He joined Seattle 4 in February of 1988, and during his vocational time in our communities, he's worked at Ben Bridge Jewelers. He served as a Navy Judge Advocate General or JAG officer, and he's been an active philanthropist. This year, as an SRSF trustee, he has led our Seattle Rotary Service Foundation fundraising campaign. John, thanks for your leadership both in Seattle 4 and in our region. And during our Q&A segment for the panel, our club member Dennis Williams, with a classification of financial advising and wealth management, will be our roving microphone handler here at the Westin. And our club sergeant at arms for the day, John Steckler, will recognize Zoom chat questions and present them on behalf of our Zoom participants. Now to introduce our panel and today's main program, here is John Bridge.
Well, thank you, President Jimmy. You know, that was part of my introduction, was that book, you know, that Don authored back in 2014, and I hope you'll all take a look at it. Every School, One Citizen's Guide to Transforming Education. And as you all know, how really important our education system is to me, so I'm very anxious to hear about what Don has to say. Don is a senior fellow of the Discovery Institute, and some of our guests are from the Discovery Institute, and he's chair of their program on public education reform. Don concentrated his activities in the field of public education, and he's traveled the country studying America's public schools. He was elected to the Seattle School Board and served from the year 2000 to 2001 when he was president, but 8 years in total. During his tenure, a lot of things changed within the school district, and principally, at least from both of our standpoints, John Stanford was our superintendent. Prior to his retiring in 1992, Don was the co-founder and president and chairman of the Hazelton Corporation, the world's largest contract biological and chemical research and testing company. And I do know a lot about that because my wife's law firm represented him. So we go back a long ways. In addition to that, he is director and co-founder of the National Eating Disorders Association and is on the advisory board of the University of Washington's Foster School of Business and the ambassador board of the University of Washington's School of Education, where I also serve with him. He's been on numerous nonprofit boards. He's a graduate of the University of Washington and also has an MBA from Harvard University. And probably most important about Seattle, he's a really great alum of Ballard High School and their Beavers. Well, you can clap on that because I'm an alum of the Garfield Bulldogs. We do take those Beavers out occasionally. But without further ado, Don Nielsen, my good friend.
Here. Huh? This one? Can I take this one? Oh, okay. They told me I couldn't walk around unless I held a mic, so I'm going to hold a mic. Thank you, John, for those very kind words. I am a Ballard Beaver, very proud to be a Ballard Beaver. But very proud to be with you today. I was a member of this club for many, many years. And in fact, I'm thinking I may come back because I took over a company that was based in Montlake Terrace, and I couldn't come in to lunch all the time, so I had to drop out. But now I'm retired, so my wife says, and I'm going to maybe have time on Wednesday afternoon to join you. But in any event, today we're going to talk about education. I'm going to share with you some thoughts on why I believe it's time to rethink school, and that's the topic of the day, if you will. And the thing I want to share with you today is we're going to talk about system. We're going to talk about the education system of the United States. And I'll share with you some thoughts on what I think we need to do to fix it. And that implies it's broken, and it is broken. And I will tell you why in a minute. So, it is now April 2022. We are now starting the third year of COVID. COVID has been a disaster for our economy. It's been a disaster for most of you. It has most certainly been a disaster for our children. And what we have seen is that the learning loss is somewhere between 6 months and a year, and I've seen statistics where it's even more than that. And the people who could least afford to lose it are the ones who had the most loss. The achievement gap that you've all heard about has been exacerbated by COVID. There are children who were left alone all day long while their parents went to work with no computer and no Wi-Fi and no school. And that has happened to millions, literally millions of children over the last 2 years. It has been an unmitigated disaster. And we're starting to pay the price now. We're starting to see mental illness, and we're starting to see social and emotional development issues crop up. Teen suicides are up. Mental illnesses issues are up. Dropouts are up. And attendance is down. Crime is up. You name it. All of these kinds of things are the permutation, if you will, the result of 2 years of closed schools. And we're going to pay a price for it. Now, it's bad enough to have COVID, but our system was broken before COVID. The United States education system is broken. It's obsolete. And I don't say that it's, not doing what it's set out to do, because it's doing exactly what it's set out to do. This system that we have in our country was never designed to effectively educate every child, and it has successfully not done so for 115 years. And it's still doing so. And we need to change it. And the current performance of our system is basically this, and this is pre-COVID 2019 data. 20 to 25% of our children would drop out of school before they reached graduation. Another 45 to 50% would graduate, but they wouldn't even qualify for a community college, let alone a four-year university. And in many cases, couldn't qualify for the military. That's after 13 years of school. But 30% of our kids do get a good education. In fact, the United States still to this day turns out some of the finest and smartest young people in the world. So obviously portions of our education system do work. And what happens is the middle and upper class families find ways to pick the neighborhood in which they're going to live. They even sometimes select the school their kids are going to go to, and sometimes even the classroom, the teacher. But most of the kids don't do that. And the net result is that 70% of our children are not getting the education they need. And that's not new data. That's been going on for decades. And so what we have is an obsolete system. It's not serving 70% of the people it's supposed to serve. Now, I know of no institution in our society that could survive with that kind of performance. Can you imagine a business that failed to serve the customers 70% of the time and still stayed in business? I mean, that wouldn't last very long. We have been putting up with our school system for decades. It's time to change it. Now, why is a school system the way it is? Well, it started in the late 1800s. A guy named Horace Mann went to Europe. He went to London, and he went to Paris, and he went to Germany, which was then Prussia, to look at school systems getting ready for the Industrial Revolution. And when he got to Prussia, he liked what he saw. King Frederick had put together an education system that took kids from 6 to 14, put them in classrooms like you see here, and taught them reading, writing, and arithmetic to get the population ready for the Industrial Revolution and factory work. And they also had in mind obedience and discipline. The King Frederick wanted these children to understand who was in charge. And so he put that together as their school system. And our friend Horace Mann liked it, thought it was really good, brought it back to the state of Massachusetts and installed it, and it was the first common school in the United States. And by 1904, every state that was then a state had adopted the Massachusetts-Prussian system. And that's the system we still have. And that's when the 180-day year was established. The 180-day year was established because we were an agrarian economy. Kids couldn't work in the summer, right? We still have a 180-day year. In fact, it's diminished to 178 on average. And do you realize that we have the shortest academic year in the developed world? The American children go to school less time than any other developed nation in our globe. We have the 6-hour day. We have the 50-minute period. We have the credit. The credit, you know, you had to have so many credits to graduate. In this state, you have to have 24 credits to graduate. A credit is 9,000 minutes of seat time. You need to pass a course with a D average in order to get a credit. You don't have to know anything, you just need to pass that one test. That's the way it works. And then we have the curriculum. The curriculum that we enjoy today, that I enjoyed when I was at Ballard, that my grandparents would have enjoyed if they were at some school in the United States, which they weren't, had 4 years of English, 3 years of history, 3 years of science, 3 years of math. It's still in place today. When was the last time you did a quadratic equation? Every one of you had to learn to do a quadratic equation to get out of high school. That's the last time 90% of you did it. But we don't teach financial management, we don't teach statistics, we don't teach civics, we don't teach nutrition, we don't teach health and science. Hello? The United States has lost ground. Not that we've done anything different, we're just as bad as we always were, but the rest of the world has improved. We're now 17th in reading, we're number 23 in math, or science, and we're number 33 in math. And makes us number 23 overall in the developed world, just below Estonia. So we have these kinds of issues facing our children. So, what do we do? Well, let me back up and just talk about the current system. The current system is what I would call an unregulated monopoly. And by that I mean, you have no choice. As a citizen of this country, you are mandated by law to send your children to school, which is fine. I don't have too much problem. But you have to go to the local school. You are assigned to the local school unless you have enough money to go to a private school, but you still have to send your child to a school. That's okay. I don't have too much problems with that. But the monopoly is not working for most kids, and you have no choice. And then to add to the monopoly situation, we have another monopoly called unions. And unions are focusing on adults. They don't focus on children. And as a consequence, the adults are well cared for in our education system, but the children are not. And one of the most pervasive things, it saw this play out in the COVID time, where the unions were demanding certain things be in place before the teachers would come back to work. And in Los Angeles, which was the height of hypocrisy that I could say, they said that the school board had to pass rule against, to defund the Los Angeles Police Department and stop any further expansion of charter schools as a condition of going back to work because of COVID. Give me a break, you know? That's what's going on. And then we have the nation itself is about an $800 billion enterprise with 6.5 million employees and 50 million children. That is a big hog to change. It's not going to be easy to change. And the other thing about it is that the school calendar has become part and parcel of the culture of the American society. And a travel and tourism industry has built up around that school calendar, and they will fight any meaningful change in education. And then, of course, the 30% of the parents who like this present system because it works for their kid, they're going to fight it too. And those are middle to upper class parents, and they vote. So this is not an easy task that we're taking on, but it's a necessary task. Now, where do we start? Well, the entity of change is the state. It's not the school, it's not the district, it's not the federal government, it's the state. And the reason it's the state is because the state controls most of the money. 60%, when I was on the school board, 60% of the budget came directly from the state, another 30% came from levies, and 10% came from the federal government. And that's still the case today. But the state controls both the 60% and the 30% in terms of regulations and codes. So they control the money. Now, they also control the people. And they control the people through certification laws. And in order to be a teacher, you have to go to an education school. And you have to become certified. Now, initially, that made all kinds of sense. It gives us a qualified teacher in every classroom. And initially, I think it worked. But now we have 1,400 education schools in the United States. The spectrum of quality from the best to the worst is substantial. Here in this state, we have 23. Virginia has 50. In order to be a teacher, you have to go to an education school. So by definition, that gives education schools a monopoly over the sorts of human capital coming into our schools. So that's the third monopoly in our system. Monopolies over time become atrophy, inefficient, and ineffective. And that's happening throughout our education system. And it gets worse, because to become a principal, you have to first be a teacher, and then you go to an education school to become a principal. Okay, that's how we choose our leaders. The only requirement to be a teacher is that you have a high school diploma and money for tuition. The only requirement to be a principal is that you have 2 years of teaching experience and money for tuition. In fact, some of our very worst teachers are the very first to become principals. If you can't make it in the classroom, become an administrator. We wonder why it doesn't work. The state also controls the curriculum. It gets back to the credit, the 4 years of English, 3 years of math. They control the curriculum, they control the testing, you know about the WASL, and they control graduation requirements. So if you're going to change anything, you have to start at the state level. Now, what would we change if we could? Well, let's describe the present system of what I think we should have as a future system. Now, the present system is input-oriented, and it needs to be output-oriented. You know, we measure 180 days, 6-hour days, 50-minute periods. We measure all kinds of inputs, but we don't measure outputs, like what percentage of the students graduated on time and were enrolled in a post-secondary institution within 3 months? How many are at grade level in every subject in every grade? What percentage? We don't measure those kind of things. In fact, nobody really cares because there's no consequences to not performing. We have an input-driven system. We need an output-driven system. We have an adult-focused system, and it gets back to my comments about the unions. Everything about our institution is focused around the adults. It is not focused around the children, or we'd have a better system if we did. We have a teaching-focused system, not a learning-focused system. It reminds me of the swimming coach who said, I taught all of these kids how to swim, but they still sink when they jump in the pool. That's what happens in a lot of our classrooms. We teach it, but they didn't learn it. It's a group-based system. You know, you only have to have 2 children to know how totally different children could be. You put 25 children in a classroom, you have 25 different personalities, 25 different interests, 25 different sleep patterns the night before, 25 different learning readiness for that subject, 25 different everything. And we treat them all the same. We teach them the same class, the same curriculum, the same way, same length of time, and expect the same outcome. It's insane. It has never worked. It will never work. And finally, it's a time-based system. Everything in our institution is based on time. This 180 days, the 6-period day, et cetera, and even grades. Grades 1, 2, and 3. If you're 8 years old, you're in 3rd grade. I don't care if you're reading at the 1st grade level or the 5th grade level. If you're 8, you're in 3rd grade. And incidentally, you're in the 3rd grade until June, at which time you'll be promoted to the 4th grade, whether you know it or not. And in September, you'll start in the 4th grade. Have you noticed that we lost 1.5 years of schooling and nothing has changed in our school system? Those are 5 characteristics of our existing system and 5 characteristics I think we need to have of our future system. Now, there's 2 more points I want to give, and then I'll sit down. First point is that I think we need to put in choice. The customer of our schools are the parents. Private schools figured that out many, many years ago because private schools know that parents pick the school and pay the tuition. Public schools haven't figured that out. The customer is the parent. If you want a good school, you better do it for the parents. And the parents deserve and need and should have a choice of whether a child goes to school. And I'm not going to suggest that that's a winner for everybody, because in rural cities, there's only one school. There is no choice. But in suburban and urban systems, choice makes all kinds of sense. And if we're going to put in choice, we ought to change the way we fund schools and give parents the money. Not money in cash, but money in a voucher system, so that I, as a parent, can take my child and my money and finance your school if I like your school. And if I don't like your school, you don't get my child, and you don't get my money. I can tell you that would be a game changer. It would force every school in the country to start shaping up and be conducive and create an environment which all children could learn. Now, let me leave you with this final comment. This paragraph, this sentence, was written in the preamble of The Nation at Risk. The Nation at Risk was published in 1983. If an unfriendly foreign power had imposed our schools upon us, we would have considered it an act of war. That's what they wrote in 1983, 39 years ago. That sentence is as applicable today as it was then. In fact, it may even be more so because of COVID. So, my friends, the United States of America has a crisis. We have lots of crises, but the single biggest crisis in our country are our schools. And if we want to fix our social system, we want to fix homeless, we want to fix healthcare, we want to fix crime, we want to fix anything you can name, the fastest and most effective way to do that is to educate our children. And I'd say that I use the phrase, the valuation of any country is the degree to which it loves, nurtures, and educates its children. As a nation, we're failing at all 3. Now, your goal this year is hope. So let me give you some hope. It is my hope, and what my colleagues at the Discovery Institute and I are working on, is we want to find one state, someplace in this country, that will take on the notion of transforming the education system of that state. And if they do that, we'll create a template for the rest of the nation. And then we can understand why I'm sitting up here telling you, and hopefully you now agree with me, it's time to rethink school. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John.
You're not on. No. Yeah. Well, my pleasure.
Dennis is going to roll the room. He's going to put your hands up for him. I'll kick it off with a question from the Zoom real quick. From Skip Calkins, question for Don. I have heard that Hurricane Katrina did what was needed. It broke the public school system in New Orleans. I've also heard that what they rebuilt was substantially better. Can you comment on that?
He's right on all points. Now, New Orleans is largely a charter school district today, and they have music schools, they have art schools, they have math schools, they have all kinds of schools, and most of them are charter schools, and they also have choice. So the vast majority of children in New Orleans today are going to the schools they want to go to. Incidentally, the state of Arizona has 30% of its children going to charter schools today. So there's, and I'm not a great proponent of charter schools in that sense that charter schools are a way to get around public schools. And my goal in life is to change public schools so we don't need charter schools.
First question from the audience, from Jeff Bork.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Don, for being here, and John, thank you for getting Don to rejoin our club. My question for you, sir, what other countries form a best example or best practice example? I'm guessing maybe out of the Netherlands, but could you comment on who's doing it well across the globe?
In test rating scores, Finland is good, Shanghai, the city of Shanghai is good, Singapore, as a nation state, has some of the highest performing schools. And if you study the system in Singapore, it's pretty obvious why they are doing so well. And I don't have time to tell you all those things, but I wrote a paper on Singapore, and you can find it on our website. Go ahead.
Next question from Linda Lowry.
Yes, thank you, Linda Lowry, she, her pronouns. I just have a question on, I love what you're doing, first of all, but I'm wondering how are you incorporating the metaverse into your solution?
How we could, I'm sorry.
How are you incorporating the metaverse, because we're now in the metaverse with AI and AR, augmented reality, and artificial intelligence. So are you taking that into consideration with your solutions that you have, that you are working on?
To work on the COVID issues? Is that what your question is?
No, just to work on our educational crisis as far as improving it and providing solutions to our nation and incorporating that, because the metaverse is here.
That's another talk.
Oh, okay.
No, in my book, and I'm not touting my book, but in my book, at the last chapter is a game plan for a state, and it delineates how I believe we have to go about fixing the system, and it's a game plan. So I didn't discuss that today because I didn't have time, but what I was trying to do today is create the opportunity for you to understand that the crisis we're in, and the solutions maybe is another talk.
Robert Statler's got a question here from the front.
Thank you, Don. There's a lot going on, a lot of talk about curriculum transparency right now.
Right.
And I think COVID awoke a lot of the parents as to what was being taught as they were home listening to the teachers. Florida passed a bill, and I think a bill was just introduced in Ohio. And I bring that up more in the context of if you had to pick maybe a state or two where you think Discovery Institute and other advocates really institute some change or help facilitate change. Do you have any states in mind that you think would follow suit?
Oh yeah. We're working right now. We're working specifically in Mississippi, Idaho, and Arizona. And I don't know which state, if either, or any of them are going to do it. But right now, those appear to be the states that have the highest potential in our mind to take this on.
Next question from David Bobenik.
Thank you. Room full of Rotarians here, people that are used to working within their networks to affect change. In your opinion, who's responsible for affecting and making the changes that you've presented here?
Well,
how does that get driven?
Okay, the changes start with state law and state code. So if you're going to start the process of improving your schools, you have to start at the state legislature. And the game plan that I've outlined is basic. I'll go through the first 4 steps that I had in mind. First step is that you have to be a right-to-work state because we have to minimize the power of unions. Unions are not the source of our problem, but they are the major constraint to fixing it. And the second thing is passing legislation for the creation of districts of innovation. Districts of innovation is like a charter district. It allows the principal, school board, and administrators to do a whole different way of doing school. The third point is to institute a Institute for Educational Leadership. If you're going to get anything done, we have to start putting out leaders. One of the interesting things in our society is that we have 4 major universities fully funded by the federal government set up for the sole purpose of training leaders for our military. There's not a single institution, not state funded, not locally funded, not federally funded, set up to train leaders for our schools. And I believe our country is far more vulnerable from within. So to me, an educational leadership issue is tantamount. So,
Don, thank you so much. We've run out of time, but a fantastic presentation.
thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank
Don, thank you. Thank you for everything. Thanks for joining us as our featured speaker today. And I personally, as the spouse of a lifelong public school educator, I particularly enjoyed your comment about hope. Transforming education can inspire hope from within the people that are trying to present education to our children. In recognition of your time with Seattle 4 today, we've contributed to Harvest Against Hunger, a Rotary District 5030 project, as well as a nonprofit which provides healthy meal components to regional food banks. 600 servings of fresh produce have been given in your honor. Special thanks go to our speedy member Dennis Williams for identifying audience questions and carrying the microphone quickly, and our multi-talented John Steckler for his faithfully managing the many facets of club meeting production today. He was the winner of the Where's Ken Grant question and got the honors as our Sergeant at Arms for the day. We want to thank the sponsors and underwriters of our meeting recordings which permit review. If you miss a meeting or want to review a program again, our Gold Meeting Archive sponsor is Liz Powell with a classification of real estate and Bob Alexander with a classification of insurance. We're also joined this week by our audiovisual provider, Live Oak AV.